friends. Welcome to the first week of discussion of the book White Too Long by Robert P. Jones. We're really excited at St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church to partner with Rayne United Methodist in this series and anyone else who has chosen to come along. That's one of the great gifts of this time, of all the virtual things that we're doing, that we can find community from across the country right here on our screens. So, week one, we delve into some hard stuff right out the gate from the very first sentence. And what you're going to see in this video is the end of a conversation amongst some clergy folks in the greater New Orleans area as we've been talking about these first chapters. So we're going to refer to, as we've been saying for the past hour, because we recorded this in the last 15 minutes of that chat. We decided that one of the best ways to start is by acknowledging our own denominational and faith traditions. Some of us come to faith later in life. Some of us come from congregations or denominational traditions that didn't have a lot of drama. But for many of us, reading these chapters about Baptist life and Methodist life and Catholic tradition can be really upsetting as we're hearing some things for the first time. So let's acknowledge at the beginning, introduce yourselves to each other, not just by name and where you are now, but a little bit of your background story of where you came from, because that's going to be important as you go forward. And then also you'll find in the email that includes this video some questions about what really stung as you were reading, what feels overwhelming, what questions are you still holding on to and wrestling with. This is going to be a really great study, and it's also going to be some work. And then we look forward on October 20th to gathering together at 6 p.m. by Zoom with Robbie Jones, who's going to talk with us about his book and answer some of your burning questions. So thanks for your time and for your commitment and for showing up. I hope this is a great series for you. Grace and peace.
In our earlier conversation, I was saying that I thought one of the most helpful things that we could do in these groups as we get started is acknowledge our own backgrounds, because depending on how we grew up and how we were formed in our faith tradition, some of this content may be more triggering or maybe more explosive, and not just being read as, oh, that's an interesting piece of history. So I'm Elizabeth Lott, and I serve as pastor at St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and grew up in a Southern Baptist tradition. Although moderate, it was very much the way of Alabama, and Bible Belt folks were Baptist folks, and anybody else was an outsider. So that's been part of the explosion for me in these early pages, is just to realize how complicit and intentional Southern Baptists were in the formation of the systems and structures that I'm now trying to help dismantle. How about y'all?
I'm Jo Cooper, also grew up Southern Baptist in Northeast Louisiana, and was honestly in my late teenage years, early adult years, before I even realized where Southern Baptist, the implication from that. But yeah, I've been a United Methodist for 25 years. I'm the pastor at Gretna United Methodist Church here on the West Bank, and serve a quite diverse congregation. And as a part of our mission statement, we celebrate that, but still looking for those ways to, like you said, Elizabeth, not only just realize it, but how do we move forward? How do I move forward with being raised by good people, surrounded by a community that loved Jesus and loved one another, and that, as we were talking about earlier, that Southern hospitality, that niceness, but also what we failed to see, what we refused to see, and then how does that affect what I'm now willing to see in my own life. And so I appreciate the struggle, and I just look forward to learning from one another.
I'm Ed Cooper. I'm a United Methodist pastor. I pastor two churches, the Aurora United Methodist Church in New Orleans and the Boynton United Methodist Church in Gretna. What's interesting for me, Aurora is almost 100% Caucasian, and my Boynton congregation is pretty much 98% African American. Like my wife, I too was raised Southern Baptist, but in North Carolina and in Virginia. My dad was a Southern Baptist pastor. But I have been a United Methodist since 1991 and have absolutely loved walking in that heritage. What I have found so challenging and startling about this study thus far for me has been what Jones has just confronted me with, the fictional nature of whiteness. That just, I know we all are confronted by different things with racism and anti-racism and so forth, but that really has jarred me, because I honestly, as much as I can know my own heart, I really never felt like, even being raised in the South, in North Carolina, I never felt like I was a part of anything that just excluded anyone because of race. No, our churches were not integrated and so forth. I mean, but in my heart, I never felt like my actions or my words excluded anyone, nor did I feel like did my theology as I, went to college and seminary and in my pastorates. But now I'm wondering, I'm really wondering, has my theology, my rhetoric, those things that I've held dear, I mean, do I need to take a look at that? This whole fictional nature of my whiteness, has that just bled over into my theology? Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to really digging into that and seeing what I can, because I need to. I need to be confronted with that.
On the note of being confronted, Reverend Ed Cooper, thank you. Jay Hogwood, Rayne Memorial United Methodist Church. Grateful to colleagues Elizabeth, Joe, Ed, to join in the confrontation, to be confronted, and to deal with how individual or personal kindness as a child of the South, raised likewise Baptist, Southern Baptist, and have come into Methodism later in life, just 9 years ago. Agreed, in the sense of sharing with you all the hope that this confrontation with my own supremacist understandings, my own blanket of supremacy, of white supremacy, is there, and to be confronted in not kindness, but in grace. Mm-hmm. And I think to that end, Jones takes pains to distinguish between a culture of kindness and the work of theologizing cruelty. And I think in that way, I'm grateful to share in what is a confronting and to acknowledge that, as he indicates in its page 16 in the first chapter, the idea of the supremacy of whiteness, and that whiteness is a fiction that I have certainly lived in for 50 full years.
Well, I've made a bunch of notes in our conversation over the past hour, and this idea of the fictional nature of whiteness and asking ourselves, what are our other fictions? That's a helpful question for me to ask, because in facing some of this story, it can be so personal for all of us who lived with some of these names as heroes, even on our landscape. It can feel like an explosion or setting fire to our histories, but to look at it with that clarity of, okay, so what
what is a fiction? What has not been true? And I have treated it as though it was. One of the things we were talking about a lot in my congregation is we want to get to this justice undoing work, which sounds like really powerful and romantic, and we're going to get out and do it. But you can't undo systems and structures without understanding what the systems and structures are. And that work is nitty gritty kind of work, and it's not big and romantic. And then Joan's book takes us even deeper into not just the systems and structures out there of courts and policing, but the thing that we've given our hearts to, the thing that we've really been shaped by. And so I think maybe a nice, softer question to enter into that is being tender with ourselves and asking, okay, what are my fictions that I have held to? I wonder, knowing that there are going to be a couple dozen folks reading this book together in community, is there a single question that jumps out to you that you want them to ask of these first pages?
I think for me, and it's part of a quote that is on page, I think it's 11. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And it goes on to say, now is the time for monsters. But, and I think it's your reminder to be tender with ourselves, to enter into the struggle. New life never comes without a struggle, and so being able to enter into that struggle, but to look within my own life and what within me needs to die. And that's quite, that is a part of our theology as believers in Jesus Christ, believers in the way. What is it in me that needs to die, but also can allow for my own mindset to deconstruct what is it within me so that new life can come, even within my own life. And I think that is my struggle as I, fight not to be offended or become defensive when I read some of these things, being an older white woman raised in the South. And like you said, such a part of my heritage and people that I trusted and relied on, but to bring it more to myself and to invite those participating. What is it within me that needs to die? What is it that needs to be deconstructed so that the truth can truly allow us to enter into freedom? And so that's kind of the mindset that I choose to in reading this book and finding ways to apply it to my own mindset. I think that's, for me, that's helpful. And I think that would be my question and my challenge.
Joe, I'm going to repeat your question because I love it and I want to make sure I hear it correctly and can disseminate it correctly. What needs to die within our own construct, within our own sense of self? Is that okay?
And I think instead of this, what needs to die, I should have said what needs to die, in my own mindset, and those things that I was taught to be nice and to be those things that are polite. As Martin Luther reminds us, those are the most dangerous of all, when we would rather be nice than right. Those aren't his words, but I think for me, that's
helpful that you hit page 11 from the previous conversation too, when we were having together to this point. I am reminded in these moments that confrontation isn't judgment. Confrontation leads to salvation. This is the nature of Jesus and the gospel tradition, certainly John's gospel. So I really appreciate you three being here and feeling that sense of confrontation that is part of the existential angst, but realizing as pastors and as congregations come into these conversations, we are helped by each other, not, of course, through judgment or condemnation, but through seeking again rebirth, as you said, Joe. I appreciate that very, very much.
For me, And Jones, I love the fact that he acknowledges this about himself when he was confronted about facing this this whole argument about whiteness and the falseness and so forth. But he felt like at one time, it doesn't matter what I discover or what I learn, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to change anything. And I honestly had to stop there for a second and just kind of have a discussion within myself and say, okay, get real about this. I mean, because it's just so easy to buy into that same argument. It says, another book on anti-racism, and just chalk that one off and read another one. And not because we all know nothing's going to change. And so I think the question to myself is, okay, what difference are you going to allow this to make in your life, and what are you going to do about it? And that would be a question that I would just present to us. What difference is this going to make? And what are we going to do about it? Or is it just another interesting book that we can now tell our friends, hey, guess what? I just read another book on anti-racism.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there real quick. And this was our practical divinity showing. So Liz, that's, or Reverend Lott, forgive me. That's part of the Wesleyan movement is, we would claim, practical divinity. And point taken. Yeah, what then, right? Okay, so what? How will this continue to make a difference for us as clergy, as pastors and preachers, and also for our congregations as we endeavor to get uncomfortable and to lead into a great grace that is always the offering of the living God that we move into. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, I think those are some great jumping off points for our groups to pass on. So thank you for those and for your time. And we will wish blessings on those who are discussing this week and then jump back in with them next week.